Welcome to I Wrote That, a podcast where we bring authors and industry experts together to talk about all things books and make the journey to authorship just a little bit easier. My name is Larissa and I am the CEO of Next Page Publishing, a hybrid publishing house where we help entrepreneurs write books to grow their businesses. Now, I'm on a mission to help aspiring authors feel like they are in control of the publishing journey and that they are supported by a team of experts who genuinely want the best for them and their books. If you are in the very beginning of your journey, or maybe you have a manuscript that you've finished and you're not sure how to get it out into the world, I encourage you to reach out to us at nextpagepublishing.net. You can schedule your free discovery call and find out how our team of experts can make your journey to being a published author easy, smooth, and successful. Now, without further ado, let's get on to our next amazing guest and make your journey to authorship a little less complicated. I'm so excited for today's guest because it's one of our very own authors from the Next Page Publishing family to talk about her book, Follow the Love, which released in December of 2023 and has been making waves ever since. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Elizabeth Wynter. She is truly an extraordinary visionary, deeply committed to transforming the lives of young people in the child welfare system. With her unwavering dedication and boundless energy, she fearlessly changes the norms and she's challenging things and she is really reshaping the future for the better. For over 2 decades, Dr. Elizabeth Wynter has been an award-winning advocate who has driven reform in the child welfare policies and tirelessly is working to make a difference. And I see that so thoroughly in her book, having had the pleasure of read it many, many times, and it's sitting on my shelf, and I'm oh so proud of everything that she and her co-authors have done. Welcome, Elizabeth. I love having authors come in and talk about their journey, but Elizabeth has a really, really special place in my heart because she's actually one of the authors who went through my programs. And so I have seen her go from this idea, and I say idea very loosely because Elizabeth came in with a mission. She was on a mission. There was no ifs, ands, or buts if this was going to happen. She said, I've got 6 months and we're going to make it happen. And I said, okay. And I've basically been along for the ride since you came through my door. It has been incredible. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Larissa. And I was so fortunate to have found you through someone else that worked with you. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect. It was just like your name landed in my lap at the exact right time that I ended up being what I call intentionally untethered, right? I had left my job and had a brief sort of period of time to write this book and was just so overjoyed to have found someone who could literally tell me the steps I need to take. I knew I was going to write a book, but how to get it published and evaluated and edited and all of that kind of good stuff. I definitely needed someone to show me the path.
Yeah. And that's the you're the dream author, someone that comes in and says, I'm going to do this. Just I need a little bit of help, right? That's how we do it. So tell us a little, like we've read your bio. We know a little bit who you are. Tell me in your words, what was the driver behind that first call between you and I? And you said, this is happening. Will you join me?
So I had just completed some really deep research on permanent connections for young people involved in the foster care system. I'd been reading this research for some time, but it really sort of got right in front of my face recently in helping my previous agency put on a think tank and really talking to folks across 35 states that supporting transitioning youth. And we were talking about, like, if there was one thing that we could change that could change everything else for these young people, because they are struggling across all domains, right? They're struggling with homelessness and involvement with the criminal justice system, unplanned pregnancies, unemployment, lack of education. Like, there's so many things that they're facing, but you can't take care of all those at the same time, right? And what is in our wheelhouse that we could actually solve for? Because housing and employment is a little bit beyond us, right? But what is in our wheelhouse? And when I heard all 35 states say it's permanent connections, you see, we brought these young people, we failed these young people, to be honest with you. We brought them in, we moved them from their families. We promised them we'd give them back to their families when their families were able to care for them. or that we would find them another family, right, that would support them. But they're leaving, 20,000 of them are leaving foster care every year across the nation. And we did not get them permanency. In fact, we did a really good job of severing those connections and that support system that is really needed when they turn 18 and then have to become self-sufficient overnight.
Mm-hmm. I get chills, and I know I'm very close to the book, having read it multiple times and done all the design work and worked with you and your co-authors, but I get chills when there's such radical responsibility for something like that. We failed them. I think a lot of externals looking at a system like this can look at the young adults and think, well, you're failing. And it's like, no, we failed them. I think that's really, really, really powerful. And I want to talk about, I kind of alluded to it, you're one of three contributors to this book. I mean, you're certainly the powerhouse behind it. What was it like working with two other people to make this book come to life?
I think that was my biggest concern that you and I spoke about earlier. So anytime I do work, and this is just how I work, because clearly the research tells that this is the best way to do it, is it's really important to me anytime I write about transitioning youth that I do it with the backing of research, right? So having my doctorate, I play a researcher on TV. I'm not, I don't have my PhD, but I really value that because that tells us the direction we should be going in, right? I mean, the research is clear. And so that research piece, and so I brought Larissa in, who has that research component that I thought was really important as I wrote this book. And then the second really important component is, if we're going to improve the child welfare system, we have to do it in co-creation, collaboration with those that have experienced the foster care system, who've lived through it, because those that are closest to the problem are also closest to solution, but furthest away from the power. And so we have to learn to listen, and you'll hear this a lot in the book, really listen, but not just listen, to value their voices. And sometimes the way things are said, or we get defensive, right? We don't listen for the important piece in that. And in order for them to give us those important nuggets of wisdom, right, we have to slow down, we have to respect, and we have to build authentic relationships, because trust is one of those things that is so hard for these young people. And so knowing that, we have to build those authentic relationships. And I say that to say, so happy to have Galen Elmore as a contributor of his stories. And he really brings, the things that I experienced in child welfare and the research that Larissa provides. He really brings sort of the magic piece that ties it all together from a personal aspect, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is it's a stunning book because there are three distinct voices that come together incredibly well. Having, you and Marisha provide the educational background, the statistics, the research, and the emotion too, because you've worked in this industry a lot and you have a lot of passion around it. Bringing that and then mixing it with Galen's real life stories, the placement of his stories in each part of the book is every time I got to one, I was like, okay, it's gonna hit home. Everything I've just read from Elizabeth and Marisha is about to be cemented in my head through Galen's story of why this is important. And he has one line, and it has stuck with me. You don't value a voice just because it gets a little deeper. And that's one of his lines that I have highlighted. I have written it in different aspects because it's so true. And when you're with, and I see it as a parent, right? Like as my daughter is growing up, I have to constantly remind myself that she is bringing new things to the table. And if you're not consciously thinking that way, it's very easy to treat an adult like a child if you've known them their whole life. And so it's stunning. So working with three authors has been incredibly interesting. Now, I know you have very, very big goals. And I think that's been the really cool part for me is every one of you has had different goals for what this book is going to be. Talk about a little bit, like your book's coming out in like 9 days as of recording this, and we are in Amazon. We are hitting publish today. Like it's coming. You have some anxiety around this. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so being a leader in the child welfare system, you learn really well to bite your tongue. But you're often challenged. Your integrity, your ethics are often challenged in that because we need money, right? We have to abide by right certain policies and requirements, and some of those are not helpful. Some of those are actually, create unintended consequences. Some of the policies create unintended consequences, and so I always I wrote it in the book, but I used to say I was going to write a book with the title "I Got Shit to Say." Sorry for anyone who doesn't like that, but that's how it felt for 25 years, that I was holding and I couldn't share with anybody. I mean, you can't talk when you're a leader, you can't talk to your staff, right? So who are you going to say these two things to? But you wake up and you go, I committed myself. I left a career in retail management, right? And I committed myself to the nonprofit space because I knew I was going to work hard and be ambitious. I knew that's who I am, but I wanted to use my my drive and ambition for good, right? I wanted to change the world. And so I went into the foster care system because I really believe, and I still do, that we can change the system, that those inside really know sort of the matrix that is child welfare. And so we know sort of the pathway, but it takes so long. And you have to get so many people rowing in the same direction, which we're often not, to actually make change happen. But I also feel like being leaders and being, supportive of your donors and your funders and all those other requirements, sometimes it's hard to say, we're not making a difference. We're working really hard, but we're not taking the right pathway. We're not taking the time that young people need to build relationships, to help them along. And we have to help them. We're the ones who took them away from their family, away from their community, away from their school often, away from their siblings sometimes. And then we expect them to somehow develop as, positive young people with no real support. I mean, unconditional love shouldn't be something that they don't get to experience in childhood, right? But they feel, and I've had young people tell me, like, everyone that is nice to me and talks to me is getting paid to do that. Now think about that, right? You shouldn't have to get paid to have a relationship with a young person, but that's how it feels to them often, that these people don't really care about them. They're only there because they're getting paid. And so, it feels sad, but again, I'm now at a place where I'm excited, and I say I'm untethered. I'm now at a place that I can say the thing that I've been holding for so long, but I'm frightened still, because I think about my colleagues reading this book, and there's going to be some things that I espouse, right? That I know the challenge of, and I'll throw one out, but I know the challenge of taking them and putting them into action, right? There's a liability, there's a risk. So when I say that we should really consider why we're terminating parents' rights with young people that came into the system as teenagers, right? They know their family, they know the dynamics. There's not really a safety issue for them. So why do we have to sever that relationship? Especially because these young people, many of them, have such loyalty and allegiance to their family that trying to get them adopted is not something they have any interest in. And so, but why would we then sever the most important relationship, their primary caregivers? Like, that's such an incredible loss for young people. And even those that get adopted are always looking to fill that void, right? There's that hole when you don't have biological parents in your life.
I feel like, and tell me if you resonate with this term, I feel like you're a whistleblower amongst the administration side of foster care systems. How does that resonate with you?
I think that's a little strong. And the reason I'm going to say that is I have been fortunate over the last few months to get in contact with a group of like-minded folks out of the child welfare system, right? And there's a really interesting time that's happening in child welfare right now, where many leaders like myself have come to that realization of, what are we working so hard for? And if we really believe that family is the stability, right? Family is safety, family is stability, then why are we working so hard to take them away from their family? Why aren't we working harder to help their family maintain their relationships with their kids, right? And so I think it's an exciting time. I think a lot of leaders like myself are now sort of shouting from the rooftops, I am responsible and I have done things that don't feel good and that are not in the best interest of kids as an administrator. And I don't want to feel that anymore. Mm-hmm. I want to do what it takes, because you get, hamstrung, right? Your hands are tied often when you're a leader. But I think there's a lot of leaders that are saying, this isn't what we should do. And I hope if there's other child welfare folks, we need to come together. We need to create containers where we can really sort of foster this conversation and consider our own sort of responsibility and accountability in fostering things that we knew weren't positive for young people and their families.
Mm-hmm.
Taking that responsibility is a big step.
Yeah, I'll take back the whistleblower and I'll call you a whistle tutor, for the lack of a better word, because as an outsider looking in, you are shedding light on something that, when I read it, was like, why are they doing this? Why has this become the norm? And I can't really think of another term for shedding that kind of light, that kind of social light on an internal system that I would never have seen the inside of unless I'd been through it, either as an administrator or as a kid going through it, right? That's or foster parent or something like that. And then there's ways to get involved in the system. But you are shedding light on something. So I'm a Canadian. I don't have ties to the American foster care system in any way, shape, or form. And I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book. And it made me look at systems that I was supposed to believe worked, and understanding that they're not working, because all I get, and for most of the population, is what TV demonstrates, right? And it's usually, I mean, you get the odd one where it's loving parents that are working really, really hard to keep their kids and under the circumstances, and it all works out. Everybody comes out happy, right? Either somebody swoops in and saves them, and it's the perfect savior, or they end up repairing the system and the system works for them. And your book just shows that that's not what's happening.
Yeah, and I think and I appreciate that. And I would call myself an advocate, sometimes an activist in moments. But I think these young people need more of us to get behind them and help them say those things and make sure that they have a voice in decisions that impact their lives. And I think that there's a lot of heroes in child welfare, right? There's a lot of foster parents, there's a lot of adoptive parents, there's a lot of staff and case managers and independent living specialists, guardian ad litems. And there's just so many people, and so many people want to do what's right for these kids. But it's really hard because it is, in the end of the day, it's a judiciary system, right? It has laws, a lot of policies that we have to abide by. But what I say, and I believe I've said it in the book as well, is at some point over the last probably 20 years, we have really gotten really strong in accountability, right? And data and all this other, well, first of all, we're collecting the wrong data, but that's a whole nother conversation. But we've gotten so heavy in accountability that I believe that we have traded in compassion for compliance. And we have lost the human in the human services world. And that's the shame of it, right? We've become very transactional instead of relational in our work. And that is a real loss.
We're going to take a quick break and head to our commercial, but you definitely don't want to miss what comes up next in this episode, because Elizabeth is going to share her tip for going from this idea, the goal, I'm going to write a book, to being published no less than 5 months later. Hey, aspiring author. Have you been exploring the idea of adding a book to your business and creating a step in your funnel that moves you from the free offer to that high ticket program that you have? You need a low ticket offer. And I'm talking between $3 and $20 that your audience can consume on their term and is in a format that they trust. And who doesn't trust a good book? Now, the trick becomes creating the content that actually converts into your high ticket offer. This is where Author comes in. At the heart of the Author event, we're helping aspiring authors with the basics. One is nailing down the art of writing that 5-star read. And we're creating the plan for how to make it successful. You can't just write a book, you have to market it. You have to know how to use it. You have to build it into your funnels. It's happening on March 18th. So secure your spot today, head on down. You can click that link. It's right below here, and prepare for a day of unparalleled inspiration and actionable insights. I'll see you there. All right, let's hop back into our conversation with Elizabeth and find out exactly what she did to go from 0 words to an entire book in 7 weeks. You and I were talking a little bit before this episode, talking about teaching and doing. You're a licensed therapist, and you kind of moved right from school, and you aimed to go into therapy, and then all of a sudden you were above, and you were teaching therapists and you were managing therapists, but you weren't actually doing it. So you're stepping back into the doing role. Talk about the combination as an author who is looking to shed light on this social issue. How did you strike the balance between in the book, you're very much the teacher, but in the real life, you had to be the doer. How did you balance those two?
I'm a crazy workaholic.
Preach.
About everything I do. And so, I love people. I am curious about people. I want to know about them. I want to help them. I want to ease their pain. There is a poem that I've carried a card. It's Emerson's poem on success. And I've carried this card in my wallet for 30 years.
Wow.
And what it says is, and it goes through a lot of things, right? But the bottom one is, if you have helped one life to breathe easier because you were there, that is to have succeeded. And that's how I feel, right? That's what we're here on this planet to do. Because of what happened in my adolescence, I had a strong inclination to become a child psychologist. That was my goal back at age 13, right? And my life took a lot of zigzags, but I was fortunate enough to go back to school and get my master's in psychology. And through that came into the nonprofit space, but very quickly, because I'd had so much experience in leadership and management, ended up as a clinical director in the foster care system, right? And so sort of helping therapists, but in the midst of that, right, sort of lost my ability to work one-on-one because I was, overseeing large organizations and programs. And so there was always this piece of me, it's like, that was a dream. Like, and I'm one that, just like writing a book, I'm one that whenever I verbalize a dream, whether I want it or not, it comes true. I've been so fortunate in my life, and I've worked pretty hard, but I've been really fortunate in my life to have seen every dream I ever verbalized, come true in my life. And so, which is unbelievable. The book is one of them. Had thought one day I would write a book, and here we are. So anyway, but I enjoy going back right now, having the time and space to go back and to my clinical, toolbox, and do that work. And then, of course, it's great to be able to teach students, master's level students, how to be clinicians and how to understand. And I learned so much from just spending time with these young people in foster care. And I find no matter what I do, clinical skills are there, right? Even though I'm not doing formal counseling often, there have been plenty of times where I've sort of had to turn that, that piece on in my head, and go there with young people, because they need to feel supported. They need to feel loved and understood, right? Don't we all want to be understood?
Mm-hmm. There's such an art in that. Actually, while I was in one of the coaching sessions with Galen one-on-one, the biggest compliment he gave me was you're really good at listening. And I think my goal at one point was also to become a therapist. So I love talking to other therapists. Like, how'd you get there? How'd you do what you do? And I do get a taste of it in the coaching aspect of drawing out that story in people, how to make it a teaching while mixing it with the emotion, the raw emotion of a situation. And it's so artfully done in your book between the three of you. It truly is a pleasurable read because you can dig into a topic really, really deeply and then be brought back out with, like, it can honestly be a one-liner of emotion that takes it from the feeling of like, oh, I'm just learning a new skill, or this is just another thing I'm going to have to implement. And then it gives you that immediate flip of like, I get it. I get where it sits in my chest of why I need to do this and what the impact is if I don't do something like this. The three voices are just, they're beautiful. So thank you for putting yourself out there and finding this team and doing something so impactful. Now, I know your episode's going to air in later February. So we're going to be well past the launch and things like that. You're going to be into sustaining growth through your book, but you do have your launch coming up next week in real time. And you have like 60 some people coming. It's like change makers, leaders coming, or, you know, registered to come to this event. Wow. There's got to be some feelings there. How are you getting ready for this launch party?
You know what I think is really great is there is a lot of people that are very interested in youth voice in child welfare. We've been talking about integrating youth voice in child welfare for over 20 years now, but it's an adaptive change. It's not a technical change. You can't just change a policy and all of a sudden you're going to listen to youth voices. But I think a lot of people are very interested in this topic right now. They're trying to figure it out. Those that are at the table trying to figure it out are the ones I love, right? Let's start with those and then we can, pass it down. But really, for me, it is so exciting to have that many people that are interested in hearing from the authors and coming to the book launch. But more than that, it just signals to me that people are something they know we can do better in child welfare. They're just not sure how to make it happen. And so I hope it gives them a pathway, a path forward for them in serving young people, because, we need to, in order to change the system, it's a long-term thing, right? And you have to change, as the book talks about, you have to change people, programs, practices, and policies. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of pieces to the system. But if we can come together, right, and row in the same direction, like I said before, I think we can get there, because I think people, just like you talked about the heart for this, there's a real heart for this. We all know that young people came into foster care through no fault of their own. They did nothing wrong except be born to parents that couldn't keep them safe, right? And so, we have to see them as victims, as opposed to often as sort of these thugs, as these juvenile delinquents, as these, you know what I mean? So it's, if we can shift it and realize, and I put something on LinkedIn that it just sits with me, young people are not giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time. And as you think about that, right, because we often say, and if I hear this word, like these couple words that make me crazy, that young people are sabotaging their placements and they're manipulative. Young people are not manipulative. They are survivors. This is how they've learned to survive. And so we have to see it. We have to be trauma responsive. We have to see their actions in light of what they've been through and in light of where they are, as opposed to blaming them, putting them down, right? Giving consequences and all this other kind of stuff. That's a trauma response. Like, that's what they're doing. They're surviving. And God forbid, you know what I mean, that they have to do that. And I'd love to take that away for them.
It's the epitome of empathy, right? And I think a lot of us can, especially those of us that have been very blessed to never have a look into a system like this, or even have had trauma in our lives. We can look at someone that's like us and have a lot of empathy, but to look at someone that has been through something different than us, it's really hard to understand what the other side of the coin is. And your book gives that to people, especially through Galen's story of like understanding. Because if you met Galen, and I'm really hoping to get him on the show, surface level conversations, you would never guess that he has been through what he has been through and the story that he has. And then you dig deeper and you pick up Elizabeth's book and you read it and you're like, this person has a story. And it opens the door for that empathy of understanding that there are other sides to the coin that we don't see up front, and that resistance that we are getting from some people. Like, I see it in business all the time. Someone sends me a nasty email and it's so quick to say, ugh, they're a jerk, right? You know, they're not nice. They're probably having a bad day. Maybe they've had a bad year. Like, you don't know. And I think that your book really highlights that it's not on them. There's something going on. And as the fully functioning adults that we pretend to be, we have a role to play in helping them through that. I think it's so beautiful the way you've done it.
And I think the one thing in the book, when I talk about scaffolding, permanent connection scaffolding, you know, when you think of a scaffold, it really helps support when the building is being built, right? It helps support that foundation for the building. And, you know, I think about these young people that when they exit care, right, at 18, 21, 23, whatever the program is that the state has, we sort of expect them to become self-sufficient overnight. And yet research shows that, you know, emerging adulthood, young people are taking longer and longer to leave their family home and get married and that kind of thing, because it's, I mean, housing prices and everything else that's out there is really tough.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we need to help them rebuild their support system. And they don't have transportation. Oftentimes they don't have, you know, the means or the communication, right? So we need to help them, and we need to help teach them social skills. And Galen does a beautiful job of talking about not learning to not need people. We need to teach young people help-seeking behavior, because ultimately we want them to be interdependent, not independent. Right.
I was going to bring that up. Yes. One of my favorite distinctions in terminology in your book is independent versus interdependent. I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, because none of us are independent. All of us rely upon people. And I think about my connections, and I ask other people I talk to, like, how have your connections helped you in life? And we all think about, my gosh, my connections helped me meet my husband, my, you know, whatever, buy my house, whatever, get my job. Like all of that. And then we think about these young people that we have serially severed connections over time in foster care. Well, we need to do the opposite. We need to help identify, strengthen, and sustain connections over time. And so that when they leave care at 18, they don't just have one person. They have a gob of people that love them and who they love and who love them. We need to follow the love.
Follow the love. What a wonderful wrap up to this. So thank you so much, Elizabeth. How do people get in contact with you if they want to have more conversations around this, or how do they buy your book?
Well, they can check out my website, drwynter.com, and they can find all of that. And then they can go to Amazon to buy my book, Follow the Love.
Yeah, so we'll put the link to her website down in the show notes, so you can go ahead and grab it there. Amazing resources. I know in the book itself, we have lots of QR codes to go. It directs right back to Elizabeth's website, where she has pretty much an evergreen list of resources for people who want more on this topic, whether you're just curious like I am and don't really have a role in the foster care system, but feel like this is something we need to know more about as a social issue that does affect us all. Or if you are in the administration role, that is definitely a resource you're going to want to go to. So my last question for you, Elizabeth, is what advice do you have for aspiring authors?
I want aspiring authors to know that your dream is a possibility, right? And all it takes is some really good planning, a good concept. You will change your pathway several times. I did in writing, and no, that's not a problem. But if you want to write a book, it is possible to write a book. It is not It is not near as hard as I thought it might be from the outset. And then once it starts flowing, I mean, my gosh, like once you're in that zone, just hold on to that. Don't let anyone interrupt you, because when you're in that zone and you're writing, it's going to be great. But just again, give yourself time and space, but definitely believe that you can do it. And that's the first thing, right? Is you have to believe. I mean, that's what I told Larissa when I met her, right? I said, I've written a dissertation. I know I can write a book, right?
Yeah.
So having that self-confidence, I think, is what hinders a lot of people. But trust me, you can write your book and you will feel so, like, I just felt like it was just it was a book that was waiting to be written. It just flowed out of me when I let it come. And
Isn't
so
that the truth?
I just, yeah, I'm sorry.
I said, isn't that the truth? I was literally holding on as you plowed through it. Like normally people in my program, about a chapter a week. Elizabeth, you were writing like 10,000 words a week. Like it was astronomical. And I was like, okay, Larissa, let's just keep up and keep encouraging and keep going. Yeah, it was wonderful. Okay.
It was the time, that's what happens sometimes. I always say, if you've got a dream, when a door opens, run through it. Be ready to run through it. Because those opportunities don't come all the time, and you've got to take advantage of any of those opportunities. So if you have a break in life or a break, any kind of vacation, take it, write your book.
Yeah, or if life throws you a curveball that doesn't feel like a vacation, reframe it and make it one. This is the break I was clearly waiting for. Awesome. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of I Wrote That. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to our show so you don't miss any of our upcoming guests. And if this has led you to some inspiration to want to get started on your own authorship journey, whether you just have an idea or you have a manuscript that you're ready to publish, reach out to us at nextpagepublishing.net, and we will match you up with our team of experts to make the journey simple, easy, and smooth.